All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'll try to do my best to let people in as they come in late. As I say that, there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. Today's our first demo day we've done here at Reviewr in a very, very long time. Kind of a quick introduction. My name is Kyle. I'm the CEO here at the company. I know you're here to see the platform, so I'll kind of hold introductions short, simple, and sweet at a very high level. Again, my name is Kyle. I'm the CEO. I've been doing this now for almost 12 years at Reviewr. It's hard to believe, impacting a lot of organizations and a lot of lives. And kind of a quick introduction of why we exist. Over the years, doing thousands and thousands of these campaigns and these programs from, member recognition awards to scholarships to grants to fellowships to abstracts. I tried to spend some time this morning going through all the invites, getting a better feel for, the type of organizations that are attending today, as well as the type of programming that you offer. I think in a good way, many of you are offering multiple uses of Reviewr. The concept of an online application submission review based program, very heavily involved with scholarships and grants. So that's kind of what our background looks like. So again, doing this now for many, many years, and we've seen arguably every imaginable workflow. And by now, I like to think I'd seen something new might pop up, but we've gone through the days of the hard copy physical paper, the thousands and thousands of binders being mailed to people's doorsteps, the printing of things off, the mailing it to the review committees. We kind of went through and saw the transition online, which typically meant, using databases, AMSs, downloading of documents, emails, spreadsheets, more emails if I hadn't said that before. And we kind of saw the negative ramifications from those types of workflows. So, generally speaking, I think almost everybody on today's demo day works for a mission-driven organization. So, if I had to guess, your time is better spent fulfilling your team's mission, vision, and values, and less so, downloading of documents and pulling in spreadsheets and emailing people and things like that. With that said, you make up very, frankly, a small percentage of the program, right? Your applicants and your submitters, your volunteers, your committee members, your board, they make up roughly 60 to 70% of the volume. And so how do we kind of elevate the experience for them as well? And that's kind of where we got our roots started from. We got really tired of applicants who would send in applications through email with a bunch of attachments just to find out months later after, scholarship checks were cut that they were sitting in the spam filter and didn't even get included in review and selections. Got very, very tired of hearing these horror stories of review committee members who obviously weren't having data redacted from their point of views, who are making very clear, cut and dry, biased selections, based off of personal identifying information about the applicants or demographic details or whatever it might be. And of course, we felt bad for the operation teams, with young children who were at home, on a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, downloading documents and spreadsheets and compiling things. So that's kind of the mindset of why we built Reviewr as an online platform that's meant for mission-driven organizations, so foundations, nonprofits, academia, membership-based associations. That list goes on, as a way to power the entire life cycle of their application, the management of them, and then of course like the review and selection processes. So my goal today is to kind of walk through those three experiences: apply, manage, and review. And kind of talk through some of the main, I guess, features or elements that I think makes Reviewr a big, driving force in helping you fulfill your organization's mission and vision. So, with that kind of long-winded introduction, let's kind of jump into the nuts and bolts of Reviewr. What I will say is there's a built-in chat in Zoom. I'm sure most of you by now are familiar with it. If you have any questions, comments, or things that you want to add to it, specifically on different sections that we're at, please do throw those in there. I'm going to do my best to kind of monitor those questions as they come in, and then any additional questions we'll save for the end, and we can kind of circle back. So, I love to kind of keep these demo days and these tours as interactive as humanly possible. I also want to kind of tease here just a little bit that I'm also going to showcase at a high level Sidekick. It's an AI platform that we're about to launch here the next couple months. It's an AI assistant tool for many of you, not only to help streamline operations, but also probably more importantly, is help you detect the usage of AI like Chat GPT with application writing. So, that wasn't part of the agenda going in today, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of give you a little teaser, sneak peek of that. So, with that said, with all the different programs and offerings that we do here at Reviewr, from an implementation perspective, we are relatively hands-on. There are so many moving parts to these campaigns. And so with a platform as robust as Reviewr, you're just not going to be aware of all the many features and value proposition adds that we have. And so we take a vested interest in your program to kind of really uncover like what are your goals, what is it that you're trying to use Reviewr for, what's your desired process, And then let us dig into our bag of goodies of different features or industry trends and things that we're seeing and make those recommendations to you. Whether or not you want to listen to us or not, that's totally up to you. It doesn't hurt our feelings. But the idea is that we want to take your brain, our brain, and kind of mesh them together to maximize both the use of the platform, but then also elevate the space in general. Because again, we are kind of, part of this mission-driven mindset. So the first step that we always want to kind of dive into is like, where are people going to go to these programs to apply? Again, I'm trying to broadly speak here today because there's a very wide variety of people who are attending, from awards to scholarships to grants to fellowships to abstracts. And so each one of those might have some small unique nuances. So use your thinking caps just a little bit to kind of visualize how this might work for you. But at the end of the day, the majority of the clients that are using Reviewr are going to use their main websites, right? You have strong content control, strong branding control. So let's use your site. And then on there, they put a link that says, click here to apply, click here to nominate, whatever that verbiage looks like. And that's what sends them from your web presence over to Reviewr. And so the first thing that we're going to look at, powered by Reviewr, is what I call like a microsite or a landing page. Now, these pages will pull in your branding, your logo, primary color, secondary color, etc. But the main purpose here is it serves as a middleman between your web presence and then like the program portal. It's also very common for applicants within these campaigns to do two things. One, they don't read. So dates, deadlines, criteria, eligibility, they're looking for that shiny submit button. So if we can kind of reiterate what those dates and deadlines look like, that's a total win. Still can't guarantee they're going to read it, but it does help. The other thing that's very, very consistent that we'll kind of circle back on later on is that they always procrastinate. So if your deadline is Friday at 5 p.m., your submissions are coming at Friday at 4:59, right? And so the idea is like, how do we provide an entry point for them to come back, save, log out, and finish their work up until those deadlines? If this page is a bit redundant for you, that's totally fine. You don't have to use any of these things that we're talking about. I like to think of Reviewr as like a modular type of platform. So if there's elements or components that just aren't a fit for you, or if you don't want to use, great, we just don't turn them on. With that said, for those that don't want to use these microsites, that's totally fine. We instead will send you to a page kind of like this, which is what I call like a profile creation page. Now, this is really where the rubber hits the road in Reviewr. So with all of these different types of programs that we're talking about, there are so many moving parts. You have people, you have submissions, plural, because you might have like an initial application, and or you might have additional follow-up submissions being added either throughout the course of the program, or if you're a scholarship provider or a grant maker, maybe those that get selected will have to come back 4 months from now, 3 years from now, 2 years from now, and submit like grant reporting templates or fund disbursement forms. So you've got people, submissions, plural, file uploads and documents, communication, judging and selection processes. If you're an award program, you might have nominations as well as the nominees. You might have references coming in. And so I just threw out like 10 different components that go into these programs. And I don't want to see you having to use 10 different platforms and try to export things and merge them back together. So in Reviewr, the idea is to centralize workflows through a concept called a profile. So the applicant comes in, they put in who they are, and then it drops them into the submission process. Now, for those with AMSs or different CMSs, we can do things like single sign-on to lower the barrier for applicants. But the general idea is they got to put in who they are, and then it drops them into what I call like the submission workflow. For those who are running member recognition awards on the phone or on this call, this process might look slightly different for you because many of you want to lower the barrier for nominators. And so what you would do is you'd have no account creation. You just drop them right into a nomination form. It's going to look like, who are you? Who are you nominating and why? And then if I were you, I would use like a trigger system that would notify the nominee saying, hey, you've been nominated for this year's XYZ award category. Click here to join your nomination. They then get brought into like a welcome page where they would then fill this out. And then from there on out, their journey is very consistent and similar to all those other programs that I had referenced. So when you get into like the submission processes, I love the concept of a personalized experience, right? So if we're able to kind of cater the questionnaires or kind of guide them through their journey based off of how they're interacting with this, that's how I prefer to do things. For many of you who are doing recognition awards, you might have multiple categories. For those that are doing scholarships and grants or even like speaker tracks, it's very common for applicants to do two things. One is they may apply for absolutely everything because they have no idea what they're eligible for, which makes it very challenging for you because you have to vet through them and figure out like what candidates did you receive that are actually qualified. Or applicants don't even apply because you have so many opportunities that might be very unique in the sense of what the criteria look like that the applicants are kind of either A, not even aware of what's available to them, or they shy away. So to kind of showcase both of that as well as the personalized experience, one of the more popular workflows in Reviewr is what I call like a matching tool. And so it's very common for, to have like a proof of process on this page, outline the scope of the campaign, and then applicants will fill out a series of questions. This is a very high level, 12 questions, short, simple, sweet. This can be as deep and robust as you need it to be. But the general idea here is what we're creating is an applicant persona, right? We're creating the profile and a persona about the applicant that in real time is checking against your different categories, awards, scholarships, grants, and opportunities to figure out, like, based on what they're submitting to the system, what do they match up with? And then based off of those answers, two things can happen. Number one is the system could say, hey, either you're not eligible, or if they were to choose a campaign that they're not eligible for, it would let them know. So it kind of stops them in their tracks, saves you time and energy, but also much more importantly is the applicant experience. We're not wasting their time filling things out that they have no shot at submitting for. Or what we can do is we can say, hey, you know what? Based off of your applicant persona and things that you filled out, these are the three different grants or the three different scholarships or the three different categories that you're actually eligible for. Which of or all of do you want to submit? And so this allows the applicant to have visibility on maybe opportunities they weren't aware of. They can pick what they want to apply for, and they can proceed on. So even going deeper into like the personalized experience concept, there's a lot of really powerful things that are happening behind the scenes, which I'll kind of get into here down the road. So one of which might be, okay, great, this applicant chose the Lennox Wilder Scholarship or Lennox Wilder Grant. Maybe you want to have different dates and deadlines, different review committees, different score sheets, different questionnaires, right? All of that becomes possible. For those of you that might be like chamber or chapter-based associations at the national or international level, maybe you want people to come in and pick like what their local chapters look like, and they fill out their application forms, and then it drops them into like a bucket with all the other chapters. But then you still have like national oversight. Like all of this becomes very, very realistic with this type of structure. The other thing that you can do here as well is it allows the applicant to kind of get visibility on what the upcoming questions will look like. So we have a concept called a proof of process, where we know for a fact that applicants are going to save, they're going to log out, they're going to come back later. We want to do two things. One is equip them for success, but also from your perspective, we want to bring you visibility on if that's happening. That way you can kind of recruit additional review committee members, you can send follow-up messages, etc. So applicants can come in here. As I progress on, you're going to notice the very first thing it's asking for is who am I, right? So the entire submission process in Reviewr is highly configurable. If I had to make up a random number, I'll just say like 200 modules. So if you can dream it up, our submission workflows can power it in whatever kind of questionnaires or the formats you want to use. Again, personalized experiences. With that said, if you're a program that allows applicants to submit to multiple campaigns or multiple opportunities, I want to avoid them having to submit redundant information multiple times. So if I was to apply for 4 different scholarships, most likely my name's not changing for those 4. And so the idea is they'd fill out one of them, and then when they go to submit to the second, third, fourth, etc., or if you have a nominator submitting nominations for multiple people, it'll say, hey, do you want to copy data from a prior submission? If so, what do you want to pull over? So I fill out my name, my email, all my personal stuff once. And then as I progress on, all those kind of opportunity specific questions. So in this example, I chose the Lennox Wilder grant. Now I'm getting a bunch of essays and question prompts that are very hyper specific to that, right? So again, we're trying to lower the barrier for the applicant, empowering them to focus on their content creation, then elevating their submission, while at the same time giving you as an operational team the data that you need to make informed decisions off of. So kind of progressing through here, when it gets to like short answers, essay questions, again, you can do formatted questions. We have built-in character limitations that we can kind of collect things in the format that you're looking for. Kind of moving on, the question just came in about getting a recording. Yeah, you bet. We'll be sending out recordings of all of this as well as an actual interactive tour of the platform. So as I kind of click through here, you can do the exact same thing. File uploads. Okay, so I mentioned beforehand that these are kind of adaptive submission processes. Complex file uploads as well as like these different workflows are very much the bread and butter of Reviewr. So as I say that, one of the items here is file uploads. I hate to see your teams collect a bunch of documents that you can't physically access, right? So I use a Mac. And so if you send me like an MP4 video or a Microsoft Word document, I'm downloading that and I'm uploading it to Google Drive because I'm a Mac user. That's problematic when you have hundreds of submissions, right, and a bunch of staff members. So the idea with Reviewr is as these documents are being submitted, we can take in well over 130 different types of files. Every single one of them gets embedded in Reviewr. So that means that when you go to access this applicant's profile, you can view your submission forms, you can view your comments, you can physically watch a video, look at a photo, look at their PowerPoint, all in Reviewr, not having to download the platform, leave, come back later, etc. So it kind of keeps everything centralized. And again, there's multiple different file types. There's multimedia, PowerPoints, PDFs, spreadsheets, you name it. Kind of going deeper on that as well. File uploads don't always have to happen on the front end. I know this isn't really a demo of Reviewr, but typically best practices tell us that things like headshots or photos maybe aren't required from everybody. So with the robust nature of an applicant profile, that empowers you to have your team or your submitters come back later on as they progress through different workflows and then submit additional documents down the road that maybe you don't need to collect on the front end from everybody. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. One thing I do want to kind of touch on here is references. So in Reviewr, we have an extremely powerful feature called supplemental forms. And it's not used just for references. It could be references, transcripts, parent forms, any deliverable or document that's being submitted on behalf of the applicant by someone else. Other great examples of that might be like if you're an award program with that dual nominator nominee process. You might have, a bunch of nominations coming in about the same person, right? So you've got one applicant, the nominee, and then a bunch of supplemental forms, which are all the nominations that were submitted about them. So lots of use cases here. With that said, the way that it works is that the applicant will put in, so again, we're kind of looking at this from a reference perspective. They'll put in like the name and email of that external individual submitting the reference. And then as soon as they go to submit or they trigger it, it'll send that email notification. So it'd say, hey, Tony, Kyle's asked that you submit a reference on his behalf. Click here to do so. And then Tony would then click on a link, which brings them into the supplemental form. Now, that's a critical piece to this. And this is, again, not really demo related, but more so just best practices from things that we've seen. Is get rid of reference letters. It's a process that over the years has stuck, but it's very challenging. So people who are writing references are being asked at the very, very last minute. They have to sit down from scratch and come up with an idea. It's challenging in the sense that A, they don't have time, and B, every single person writing a reference letter is going to have different writing levels. So it's not a direct reflection of the candidate. It's more so a reflection of how good that reference letter was written. So one thing that we love to see using this kind of supplemental form process is that, yeah, you can totally still do reference letters or uploads or make them optional. But instead is when Tony gets that email notification and clicks on the link, it actually brings them to that supplemental form where they can answer like 3 to 5 questions. Like, what are the 3 to 5 things you want your references to ask about the candidate? That way they're just kind of following along, lowers the barrier for them, increases volume. But then from an operations perspective, when you go to do a review, every single applicant has very consistent data sets amongst them, which then also kind of boosts the compliance aspect things and the consistency, et cetera. So, best practices, you can do with that what you want, but that's some of the things that we're starting to see. And with that, as we see more and more of these kind of best practices or trends, that's really what empowers and dictates the features that we're building into Reviewr. So I'll show you what that would look like here in just a few minutes. So once a submitter is done creating their application and they submit, their journey may not necessarily end. For many of them, it will. But you're able to kind of create kind of these conditions that says, okay, if they're submitting, what do you want to happen? Thank you pages, confirmation emails. Are they supposed to come back at any given time and add to their profiles? Do you want to communicate with them? These are all decisions that you have to make, and we can power all of them. So in this example, when the applicant logged back in, they're able to actually see the form that they just filled out. Maybe you want to allow them to make edits up until a certain date and deadline you can. Of course, if you want to lock that down, you can. Maybe you want to communicate with them so you can actually send one-to-one direct communication to the applicants. Maybe they want to upload files. And then going back to those supplemental forms, because there's another use case that I didn't talk about yet that's super powerful within the platform. So if I click on supplemental forms, you'll notice I have a menu here. I've got an unrealistic number of references and transcripts that were submitted about me. But the way that this works is that Ann Perkins would have got that email notification that said, hey, can you write a reference on behalf of Leslie? She clicked the link and then fill out that form. So to visualize that, if I just press view, Boom, there it is. So it takes the entire nomination, the reference, all these moving parts and puts them into one centralized hub where you can physically view everything on the applicant's profile and not have to leave the tool. Another powerful use of supplemental forms is additional data collection from the applicant. So if you are a grant maker or maybe you're a scholarship provider and you want the scholarship recipients to come in once a year and submit updated transcripts, or they have to fill out a fund disbursement form or a grant reporting template. What the applicants would do is they go to supplemental forms. Obviously, they may not have this giant list of existing stuff, and then they would click add new. And then the system would then display a prompt that says, well, what are you trying to add? Grant reporting template, parent fund disbursement form, whatever your very specific deliverables are. They then would fill it out, and then boom, it puts itself right on their profile. So, 3 years from now, you could look at an applicant's profile and see the entire life cycle of their interactions with you. So, with that said, at a high level, that's the main kind of ins and outs of the submitter experience. Again, there's a whole lot of tools and features that we have that we didn't talk about. Not the goal today. My goal is primarily to kind of showcase visually the applicant experience, how we lower the barrier for it, while still at the same time maintaining data integrity to confirm that you're getting the content that you need for a thoughtful, fair selection process. So if any questions or comments, please do toss them in there. I can answer them, or we can kind of come back at the end. The next thing that we're going to look at here is going to be from an operations perspective. So I think most people on today's demo day are operation team members. They're the ones who are running these campaigns. I feel for you. I get it. I know how many moving parts that go into these programs that unless you're in the weeds of it and doing the daily grind of running an award, scholarship, or grant, people just don't know, right? So I feel for you. That's also why we exist. So as an operations member, when you come into the platform, you get a menu. Now, your menu system may look different. If you're running multiple use cases with the system, it'll say, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to your scholarships? Do you want to go to your awards? Whatever it would look like. But once you kind of open up your program, it'll give you a command center. And so your dashboard is going to show you a couple kind of interesting metrics, but then also you can kind of deep dive into all of these down the road. So I mentioned earlier on that two things happen. People will wait till the last minute and procrastinate, and B, they don't read dates and deadlines. And so what ends up happening here on your dashboard is you can physically view in real time, like what are your dates and deadlines? You can see that timeline in the middle. You can kind of see when applications are closing, and then you can get a pulse of what's going on. So it'll show you in real time all of your applicants, what status they're in. I'm not going to get too deep in what they all mean today, but ultimately, are they submitted? Are they not done? If they're not done, are they in progress? If so, how far have they made it? Who are they? You can send them email template reminders. You can send automated reminders. If your program is one of those more, I guess, robust aspects where you have net new submissions coming in, but you also have downstream applicants who are still coming in and communicating with you or filling out additional forms. You have to know, right? Like where are different people at in this life cycle? Many of you also might be wondering, okay, cool, Kyle, you introduced this supplemental form feature, but now I have all these like reference requests and I have no visibility on where they're at. Don't worry, we got you covered as well. So we'll show you again in real time, like how many of those references or supplemental forms have been requested. Are they done? Are they not done? And then don't worry, we can also send reminder messages to them to make sure that those forms kind of get submitted and appended automatically back to the applicant's profile. I already kind of mentioned those dates and deadlines. Obviously, one thing you don't want to be doing is if you have to extend deadlines or open things back up for certain people contacting us, you want to be able to do that on your own, on the fly. So visually speaking, being able to do that. And then, of course, recent activity. So activity typically is in the form of like communication. So either internal notes, outbound emails that are happening, basically showing you on the fly, like what the heck is going on. So kind of diving deeper then, I've used the terminology profile quite a bit, right? So you have the applicants that create their profiles, they submit all their deliverables, and then long-term it holds on to all the activities about them. So what does that look like? So kind of moving on here just a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and open up accessing the applicants. So you basically get this menu system, right? And you can sort and filter by virtually any parameters, the different scholarships you offer, the different award categories, the different phases of review, a combination of all of that. But the goal here is we're going to give you a nice simple menu of all of your participants, we'll call them. And if we click on one of their names, here's hopefully where that profile concept is visualized. So I got Leslie. Leslie is an applicant. And in the center of my page, I can view all of the content we collected from her, right? So all of her personal information, her short answers, her essays. As I continue to scroll down, there's multiple file uploads that, of course, I can view. There's those reference letters, right? So whatever you're collecting on the front end gets printed here in a very simple to view format. The kind of ideology here is we loved the concept of a binder. We just hated the physical nature of them, right? So we try to virtualize that binder. But then I have action items. So off to the right, I've got some communication tools and action sets. And then off to the top, I've got more information for you that basically gets pulled out of the form for ease of use. So let's look at that. So if I wanted to communicate with Leslie, I can absolutely send outbound emails from our system, right? I can send individual emails, I can send bulk emails, I can send them from your personal email domain to ensure that they get delivered. Lots of things that we can do. With that said, one thing we want to avoid is potentially having like confidential or PII being transmitted through email just because we don't know once you press send, like who has access to that email account? Where's it going to go? Is it going to go to spam? So for things like that, we love to use some of our internal communication tools. So what you can actually do is you can jump in here and you can log communication directly to Leslie from an admin. That would send her a notification that would say, hey, Leslie, you have communication pending. She would then click on a link, brings her right back into her profile, and then you can physically view the content that you left for her. She can view it and then respond back. Other great use cases for this would be like feedback sharing. A lot of our clients, as they go through review and selection processes, are not just doing like score sheets, but they're also filling out like note-taking tools or comment tools that's used to share back anonymously back to the applicants for self-development. So that's another way that we can kind of address that. If many of you are familiar with like AMSs or CMSs, a lot of you may also want to log notes about a particular applicant that stays private either amongst yourself or with your team. So we also have a note-taking tool. So at any given time, you can log a note about Leslie. It gets stuck on her profile, but the only people that can see it are either A, yourselves, or B, whoever else you want to share it with. But Leslie, as the applicant, would never actually be able to physically see that. So it's a great way for you to collaborate internally with your staff. Okay, so I mentioned file uploads earlier. Kind of again, the bread and butter of the platform is kind of aggregating these complex processes into one centralized hub. So if I jump to my attachment section, you're going to notice I've got like 5 different file uploads. I've got photos, videos, I got PowerPoints, whatever it looks like. So it shows you a listing of every document that we've ever collected. So not just on the submission side of things, but also long-term as additional uploads are added to Leslie's profile. If I press view, again, it will embed that document right in our platform. So I don't have to worry about downloading this, going to, Adobe Acrobat, coming back into Reviewr. It just stays nice and neat in my system. I can also interact with these files. If I want to leave comments about a file or leave annotations, all sorts of additional flexibility is now unlocked. Going back to the supplemental forms, I already kind of showed you this a little bit ago from an applicant's perspective, very similar concept, right? It shows you a listing of all of the different supplemental forms that you collected either on the front end or down the road. You can open them up in a very similar fashion. I don't want you to download the references and the nominations, then go view those elsewhere and then come back. I can view them all kind of smack dab here in the system. So somebody just asked a question about the electronic binder concept and being able to look at the history, right? So long story short, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of manage a multi-year program or the history of an applicant. Generally speaking, most of our clients will take a program and then as it wraps up, they archive it, right? So you've got the 2024 awards program or the 2024 scholarships. They archive it and then they open up a new program, right? That can be almost a direct carbon copy of it. And that's incredible because now you can either A, have those old applicants still coming in, because even though it's archived, you can still give them access to some additional follow-ups or deliverables. It also kind of takes a snapshot of the data. So it's in real time. You can do like comparative reporting from prior year stuff to current year. Or there's an alternative to that. You can continue to leave the platform open, and then you can basically tag and label submissions, based off of like different cycles or if it's open or closed. So there's a lot of ways of doing that. Our team will kind of define during the setup process. Like the question really kind of comes down to what should the existing individuals do? Should they still have access to their platform? As well as how do you want to conduct reporting? And then based off of your answer to those, will best kind of dictate how you want to do that. But yeah, I mean, the name of the game is reviewers intend to be used for multiple programs for multiple years that we can kind of do crossover year comparative data. If your review teams as well are very consistent, it's also nice because they can log in with their username and be able to see their historical stuff if you want them to do so, or be able to share and view multiple opportunities at the same time, right? So if I'm a board member and I'm doing my board nominations, but I'm also judging for your award, I don't want them having three different sites and three different usernames. I want one hub that they can go to, pick the opportunity, and then do the task at hand. So yeah, great question on that. All right, so the next thing that we're going to take a look at is Sidekick, right? So I mentioned I'm going to run through this one super quick. This is meant to be more so a teaser. Recent data from November of 2023, specifically with scholarships, says that roughly 60% of scholarship applicants are leveraging the assistance of AI tools such as ChatGPT to write content. My gut tells me that number is substantially higher, and I also know for a fact it's happening with people submitting references, nominations, grant reports. And so, how do you start to identify that? By no means is Reviewr here to make decisions for you. The general idea here is that we want to flag the usage of it. That way, you can make informed decisions, do with it what you want. So, kind of a quick preview, but also I'm very open to feedback of what we're doing here. Again, this is going to launch within the next couple months. We're very excited about it. Some of the early adopters and innovators using it, we want direct feedback from you of how it's working. How do you want to do more? And that will influence like the next phase of it. But the general goal here is, as you can see off to the right, I got two different tabs, right? One's going to be basically a detection score for AI utilization. The other will be for like plagiarism utilization. And so I can kind of physically see, okay, this down here at the bottom, I got Dr. House, 100% AI detection, probably problematic. Whereas, maybe up top, Leslie had 5%, not so much, right? We know people are going to use tools like ChatGPT. And it's okay if they use it to like, hey, here's an essay prompt. Here's some information about me. Build the framework of an essay for me to write. That's different than saying copy and paste the essay prompt, copy and paste it back in the Reviewr, right? So the goal here is to help you identify trends. So if it were me, I would filter from high to low. I want to figure out like what my threshold is. Like, what's the average percent that people are leveraging these tools? And then I can say, give or take 15%. Any higher than that, I want to investigate further. Anybody at the threshold or lower, you know what? They're good to go. So the idea then is once we have kind of that threshold in place, I can open up my applicants. And then kind of going back here just a second, I mentioned beforehand those different essay prompts. It'll show you kind of two different scores, one of which would be like the AI detection score, and the other is the plagiarism detection score. So, okay, we know for a fact that this paragraph is basically telling us that 100% of this was copy and pasted from ChatGPT. So if I press that, it'll actually bring me right into our detection tool. It's going to show me exactly the content was used, how much of it we feel was copy and pasted from AI, or how much of it was manipulated by a human. Similar concept goes with plagiarism. So if I click on this score, not only will it show me the content that we flagged, but also since it is plagiarized, where do they pull it from? So I open this up and then boom, it shows me in real time the content, how much of it was an identical match, how much of it was paraphrased. And then of course, off to the right, like where do they pull it from? Wikipedia, LinkedIn, whatever that looks like. Again, by no means is Reviewr making decisions for you. All we're trying to do is bring awareness that says, hey, you know what? You might want to look at this further. If you want to do it more holistically as well, I can open my applicants up and we're going to give you a very dedicated interface that shows you a list of every question that we're running detection against, because you might have a very long submission process. You're probably not concerned about people using AI to write their first name, right? And so pick and choose what questions you want to run detection on. It shows up here. And then again, two different columns. One's going to be, okay, on that question, what percent was AI, what was plagiarized? And then in a very similar fashion, I'll just press view. And then boom, it pulls me right into the interface to check what we flagged. So questions, comments on that, throw that in the chat. Obviously, we have other AI type of what I call intelligent automation built into Reviewr from an operation side of things that we'll get into, but this is more so helping you detect the use of it. So our company name is Reviewr, and we named it that for a reason. So when it comes to the review and selection process, this is where typically speaking, things get a bit complex. So we've done an open call for applications. We've got nominations, nominees, scholarship applicants, grantees. We've got their profiles that are being submitted. We've communicated with them, we're viewing their information. Now it's time for us to take those submissions and then give it to our team for some type of selection process. That is such a simplified version of what you're doing. Many of you might have hundreds and hundreds of awards or categories. Some of you might have complex phases and workflows. Some of you might only have certain people reviewing certain applications. So how do we kind of, with that in mind, take your submissions and get them to the right people? So in Reviewr, we have a concept called buckets. And again, I'm going to try to keep this short, simple, and sweet, but just know that it's so powerful. But the idea behind a bucket is that ideally speaking, there's some automation built in. So in this use case, there's actually two phases or two levels of buckets. I have different types of grant opportunities. So I've got the Bobby Gatsby grant, the Brooke Marlowe grant, etc. But then multiple phases of review. So initial vetting phase, phase two, interviews, final selection. Again, I've seen this used to break apart like locations. Multiple chapters might be their own bucket. There's so many ways to configure this. But here's the general idea. You got a bucket called, in this example, the Lennox Wilder Grant. And I'm going to make an assumption. Let's go back here. I'm going to make an assumption that there's a bunch of applicants who applied to the Lennox Wilder Grant that are now sitting in that bucket. Next thing I need to do is give those submissions to a team to review. So what do? I fill up my bucket with committee members. So off to the right, you'll notice I got Simon, Paula, Mark, and Judge Judy. When those individuals come into Reviewr, they're physically going to be able to only see these submissions in their bucket. So if you want them to if you want them to review multiple buckets, that's great. You just give them access to multiple. But in this example, you'll notice I've got very dedicated review committees for different stages. For some of you that might also have like committee leads, or maybe you want to have like a chapter running their own program with national oversight. We also have a concept called a judge manager. So basically in this example, I got like Judge Judy here. She's able to add her own committee members and view the results and everything that's happening, but it's very confined to just her bucket. So again, very high level, we're taking submissions, reviewers, and kind of giving them to one another. But what I can do is I can also open this up and really dig deep into it. So if I open my bucket up, it'll actually show me two different lists, one of which is all of the applicants in that bucket, and the other is the potential reviewers in the bucket. So kind of digging back into like a fair, non-biased, compliant review process, many of you may be saying, okay, well, you know what? I want every submission to get reviewed exactly 3 times, no more, no less. Or you might be saying, hey, you know what? My review team doesn't have the capacity to score more than 20 people. So let's just give them, maybe no less than 10, but no more than 20. So the way that this works is that you can take your submissions and I can go ahead and press this select all, and I'm going to go ahead and auto assign this out. So in this example, I'm going to give every single submission no more than 6 evaluators, but no less than 4. The system will then take the submissions and then auto distribute it out at random and evenly amongst your team. With that said, maybe you have a conflict of interest or you want to override it, or maybe you just want to have a very, very manual control over which applicants are reviewed by who. What you can do is you can override this. And so, for example, we have Mark here. Mark is one of my committee members, and currently Mark is scoring Gabrielle, Leslie, Richard, and Sheldon. Maybe there's a conflict of interest with Leslie. I can just uncheck her name and then reassign it back out to another judge. So again, I know I ran through that relatively quickly, but the general idea is that we're taking a bunch of submissions, review members, and then giving them access. The thing that we didn't talk about there was like when they have access, what happens next? So using Mark in mind, when the review committee comes into Reviewr, one thing that I want to stress on is if you have a program that potentially could have decisions that are influenced based off of personal identifying information, we have a built-in redacting tool. So if you want to hide, demographic details or personal identifying information, you can do all that. I also want to point out that, a lot of times you might have a pretty robust submission process for data purposes, but the review committee doesn't need all of it, right? Like they don't need to see the entire form. So instead, just show them what they need for the judging process. So again, I would call that redacting, but for a totally different use case. So the goal here is that when your review team comes into Reviewr, they're going to get a menu, and that menu is going to be a list of whoever they are supposed to review. Again, it could be ID numbers, it could be names, or whatever it is. From there, they simply click view, and then hopefully the interfaces, as you can see here, stay very consistent from start to finish. And so they get a split screen. So again, the goal is to lower the barrier for them so they can kind of focus on their review. They can off to the left, scroll through the submission form, and then off to the right, scroll through your score sheet. As far as these score sheets go, there's a million and one ways to do reviews. I've seen thumbs up, thumbs down, sad face, ugly face. I've seen extremely complex weighted scoring system where it's like question, score, it's weighted, and then leave a comment. It's up to you how you want to conduct your review. I've seen ranking tools, but the idea is that you're going to display some type of questionnaire for them to fill out while side by side accessing the content and filling it out. One other kind of best practice, a lot of our clients in the past have done like, hey, on this question, rate this applicant on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 through 10. Review committee members often get bogged down in numbers. So like they'll ask, well, what's the difference between a 7 and an 8? So let's just jump the gun on that. And instead, let's just ask them to answer a series of questions. So in this example, it's like, okay, well, let's rate the applicant's scholastic achievements from, great to not great. And then behind the scenes, there are point values. So the idea is that the review team can actually up top toggle back and forth between the submission form. They can embed those file uploads. They can jump to their note-taking tools. If you are showing them like references or nominations, they can go to the supplemental forms. Again, the entire thing is visible on one page. And then when they're ready to go submit their score, it does do the tabulations for you. And then from an operations perspective, we kick out this really helpful leaderboard. So you can sort and filter by grant, scholarship, award, category, phase, right? Whatever your filtering looks like. And then we give you a hierarchy of all of your applicants. We'll show you how each one of them scored, as well as totals and averages. So for many of you, you may use this for your results. For others, you may say, you know what, let's just take the top 5 and then move them to phase 2. That's great. We can just select them from here and then move them to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, etc. With that said, I'm going to call out kind of the elephant in the room here. And if you do random judge distribution, that typically means that every applicant might be reviewed by different people. And so looking at this, I have a problem. And that problem is Mark scored Sheldon a 12, but Judge Judy gave it a 31. So either A, Mark Cuban just really didn't like Sheldon, or what if Mark Cuban's a hard ass? Like, what if he never gives higher than a 13? Well, the problem is that no matter what, this is going to lower the applicant's total and averages. And in this example, it went from receiving the award or winning scholarship funding to not, right? So with Reviewr, we actually have a way for you to identify that and then normalize it. So this is going to be kind of an example spreadsheet. But what basically happens here is we're going to give you what I call a normalization report. And it's going to show you on a per applicant basis, every single judge that scored them on a per question level. So kind of jumping really into what you care about is we basically will then be able to identify this green section. So to kind of break this apart, what we're doing is we're trying to figure out what the average selection is per judge. So you'll see here that Judge Judy on average scores a 23, but Tony over here on average scores a 34. And by the way, this is redacted data, but this is a real client of ours that this was happening. So in this example, anybody that Judge Judy scores is going to be ranked lower than Tony, right? And that just can't happen. So because now we know their averages, we can create baselines. So what I can say here is that any applicant that is scored by Judge Judy that gets a 23 is now a 1. Not a 23, it's a 1 because 1 is completely average. If they scored higher than a 23, then their score is like what, like a 1.11. If they scored lower than a 23, now their score is like a 0.95. And so because now we have each individual judge's barometer, we can now normalize it out. And so we basically give you a centered score that says on average, Bruce Banner scores 1.15 times higher than average, whereas Tony Stark scores 0.9 times lower than average. Now, many of our clients use this. This is the way that they do their selections. Others say, you know what, let's just use this in conjunction with that leaderboard that I showed you and let you make your own informed decisions off of this. My goal is to give you guys 15 minutes of Q&A. So please do toss them into the chat. Came in about how to set up like a one-to-one meeting with us. We can do a couple different things. I mean, at any time you can go to our website, you can schedule a demo. Hopefully it's easy to get in touch with us. Yeah, so somebody asked about showing the dashboard, or somebody has like multiple applications or submissions in the process. I can totally do that. I have to log in as one of the applicants. Maybe this is a separate question that you and I can kind of talk about because to your point, it's a very common thing that happens, but also very complex because what happens if you have multiple submissions at different stages, right? Some are done, some are currently in progress. What if you have a scholarship application that you apply to 3 separate scholarships? You received funding on one of them is still in progress, and then you got denied in the third, right? And so all of those will kind of dictate what they can see, and also when they come into their submission, like what they're able to do. Is it receiving feedback? Is it submitting post-grant deliverables? All that kind of fun stuff. Yeah, question that came in about Sidekick. So Sidekick in general is kind of a multi-part process. Some of it is proprietary internal. So using like intelligent automation, the matching tools, all those things are Reviewr. As far as using detection goes, that's an evolving space. There are so many new platforms that are popping up. Chat GPT used to be the most popular. Now Claude is becoming quite popular. And so, yeah, we are 100% doing multiple integrations against multiple sources. We're vetting them. We're trying to make sure that we're staying up to date with what the most accurate are, and that's how we're powering it. So that's how we chose, is it's likely going to change, right? We're constantly going to be changing our sources. We want to make sure that we're giving you the most accurate data that you need, as well as kind of staying ahead of the trend, right? Because, I had a call the other day and I asked them, hey, how'd you hear about Reviewr? And their answer was, well, I plugged it into Chat GPT. I said, like, what are the industry leading scholarship platforms? And your name popped up. I mean, a year ago, I never would have thought that that would have been a thing. So, yeah, it's very kind of exciting times, but also very unknown futures. Yeah, so you asked about the nomination form that doesn't require a login, but can they access the nomination later? Another great question. So with Reviewr, the concept of a profile is always there. So the idea with nominations, I'm not against having them create an account. That's a decision you have to make. Like generally speaking, I love the idea, right? Because they can save, they can log out, they can come back later. But with that said, it does kind of what I would say add a layer of complexity. It's a barrier. It's 2024. Like most of us are used to having many, many accounts. We can recover them if we need to. But what ends up happening, and this wouldn't just be for like nomination forms, this is just in general. We also have a lot of clients as well that will import data from like Jotform into Reviewr because they want us to take over their other processes. And so once they fill out their submission form, it creates a quote unquote profile. There just is no password associated with it because we know who they are. So what ends up happening is if you want them to rejoin it down the road, you can trigger an invite that would say, hey, Tony, if you want to access your nomination, click here. And then they can just join what they filled out. And then from there on, they have an account. Alternatively, one process I love is there is no account creation. They just fill out the form, but then as soon as they press submit, in their confirmation email, it says, thank you for your application or thank you for your nomination. Oh, yeah. And by the way, if you want to access your stuff, click here. And then they will then create their profile at the end. So it's kind of a flipped process, but it works quite well. Questions around building a program sessions and make that available to attendees of an event. Yeah, so generally speaking, when it comes to like abstract or speaker management, Reviewr is kind of the tool to collect the applications, go through the entire review selection processes. Once you go and do your selections, what you'd end up doing is you'd assign like labels or append like a group to them, which is both like a topic or a speaker time slot or a session, which allows you then to do a couple different things. One of which is you can sort, filter, find them. We do have what I call a showcase page, which is pretty cool. And so the showcase page, and this isn't just relevant to that. This might be like award programs trying to showcase award recipients. Some people use it for public voting. But the idea is that you can kind of go to that page. You can physically see those profiles based off of a search parameter. So for you, that search parameter will be like the session or the program. With that said, there are dedicated tools out there that are crushing it when it comes to like attendee management. And so if that is the case, I'd almost rather figure out like what's your end game. And then can we just either A, integrate, or B, provide like an import file for you? I'm a big proponent of staying in your lane and doing what you do really, really well, and then working with a bunch of other people who do what they do really well to make sure that you get the services that you deserve. Yeah, so question on importing data into other databases, love it, much preferred. So since you own your data in Reviewr, you have virtually many different ways of getting it out. There are some built-in system reports, so submission information, user information, judging and selection results. We also have a very robust custom reporting feature, which basically says, look, as long as we have the data in Reviewr, we can build it into whatever report format you want. So that's often used to build like an import file. No, you're not building it every time either. You build it once and it's repeatable. We also have a really cool kind of export feature, which basically dumps all of your data into a zip file. And then every single folder is an applicant. And then within their folder will be their submission form and a PDF, as well as all their supporting documents and deliverables as well. So ideally speaking, we kind of want to figure out like what you're trying to import into. And then, yeah, there's no doubt there's some way of doing it, making the assumption, right, that they have a way to import in. But the other piece of that is that we we do have an API. It's not a public API that we can use to kind of hook up different systems. So we can also kind of explore what that would look like for more of like a real-time, passing of data. Yeah, a question just came in about the redacting of data. It's challenging, right? So in Reviewr, as long as we know what the data is, you can redact it, right? So first name, last name, demographic details, address, right? Any of that stuff can be redacted in real time automatically. You're not even touching it. It just happens for you. When data comes in through essays or for file uploads, so in your question, it's a transcript, it becomes more challenging because we don't know technically what speaking is personal identifying information that we have to redact. So because of that, and down the road, we are looking at potentially ways of doing that. But in the short term, we want to make sure that we give you easy access to data to do stuff with it. So in that example, you can actually in Reviewr like export, download, redact it, put it back in the system. I've seen some clients replace open-ended essay questions with the term redacted. There's lots of ways of doing it. But ultimately, you're gonna have to review the content that was submitted, figure out like, hey, is there something that needs redacted or not? And if it's, part of a scanned document at this point in time, we really can't automate that yet for you. But my promise to you is that we'll make it very, very easy for you to catch it and then re-add the file redacted when we're done. So yeah, question came around like showing what the applicant sees when they log in after they've submitted. Yeah, totally. So what ends up happening here is if I go back to like the submission experience, again, there's two very different interfaces. So one is like the public facing submission process, right? And then from there, once they're done, either once they submit or if they were to save and exit and come back later, they would instead see a page kind of like this, right? So it's their profile. Now, the components on here may change depending on A, what you want them to have access to, and B, what stage that they're at. So with your specific question, you're saying like after they've completed their application, but they haven't yet been given an award. So maybe for you, you haven't even conducted reviews yet. So you want to allow them to edit. So they can view their submission, they can view all their content, all their deliverables. They can edit up until whatever deadline that you set. And then once that deadline passes, you lock them out. They can still come back, but it's just view only. Maybe you're communicating with them. Some of our clients are like, they almost treat this like a mentorship opportunity where as submissions come in, somebody may read it and say, hey, because you submitted it early, we're going to give you feedback. And then they can come back, take that feedback from the question and comment section, modify their application, resubmit it, right? Or we can kind of send it back for revision. So ultimately the question comes down to like, yeah, like once they're done submitting, like what do you want them to see? Question about reporting on all applicants at once, or can you only do a report for one profile? I mean, more times than not, you're going to want to be able to do it all at once, right? So at a high level, some of the reports would be like a row per applicant, and then each column is the data associated with them. Of course, you can narrow your search parameters down to get a much more like dedicated report, but generally speaking, most of our reporting is comprehensive aggregates versus having to go to individual people and then run reports on a one-by-one basis. Question came in about how easy it is to have multiple award types in the system. They've got grants, scholarships, and awards can be up to 60 workflows in one system. I love it. That's ideally where Reviewr comes into play. So if it's me and I'm structuring this, but to be very clear, when we go through the setup implementation process, our team is going to become an expert in what you're doing. And based off of that conversation, they will best kind of inform of how we're going to set up the platform. They're going to do the bulk of it, and then we're going to run through things together until we're comfortable and we've kind of knocked it out of the park. But if it's me and I'm an organization that does awards, scholarships, and grants, I'm probably going to have three dedicated command centers. So if I go back here a little bit, I'm going to have three command centers, one for awards, one for grants, one for scholarships. And then what I'm going to do is nested within each one of them, I'm going to have my different workflows. So just because I'm kind of into awards today, we'll use that as an example. I might have like a 40 under 40 award, the new member of the year award, the Carson Kirby award, right? And so that's where in the submission process, there's all those adaptive, or what I call intelligent automations, where the system will recognize what award category or what scholarship or what grant is it for, and then it'll drop the applicant into whatever bucket that matches with their choices. Now, again, they're not stuck there. You can move them around at any given time, but the idea is like, okay, you've got a program type called an award, and then within your program type, you've got 7 different awards themselves. That also gives you the flexibility to have different review committee members, dates and deadlines, score sheets, right? All this flexibility that comes into play. From a communication perspective, yeah, going to spam is tough, right? What I will tell you is that back in February, there's a pretty tremendous overhaul with internet service providers about how communication gets delivered, and it very much is a problem, and not just with Reviewr, but just in general. So there's 2 things or 3 things I'll do. So number 1 is we love to work alongside your current email. So for example, like if it's Kyle@reviewr.com, that's probably a bad example. Kyle@acme.org. What we can do is we can integrate with your email provider, and then we'll actually work alongside you and your IT team to get very specific. We'll give you a series of DNS records that basically authenticates it. It says, look, we're giving Reviewr permission to send from our domain, and we have all these kind of protocols in place to ensure high deliverability. So that'd be number 1. We can always backfill it and use like a no reply at Reviewr if we need to. Generally speaking, using DKIM records, SPF records, and DMARC records. Number 1, integrate with your email provider. Number 2, set up a DMARC record, DMARC, DKIM, and SPF, right? So there's 3 different kind of validations that basically just help build the reputation of the sender. That's number 1. Number 2 is we still can't 100% avoid spam. So we're going to give you deliverability kind of results, basically saying like, did they get it or not? If not, that's also where I love this concept in Reviewr of the note-taking tools. And the reason why is because I can log off to the right a question or comment, and it's still going to send that applicant an email. It's going to say, hey, Tony, Kyle sent you a message. That message can say whatever you want, right? But the idea is that even if they don't get that email notification, the content of it is still in Reviewr. So you can call them, you can send them physical mail, you can do smoke signals. But if they come back into Reviewr, they're going to see that communication. So we're not basically preventing them from seeing it, even though the notification might have got blocked, the content that you wanted them to see still lives on.